Hello. So dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to talk about virtual production in Unreal Engine. So my name is Ryan Mayeda. I'm a product manager at Epic, focused on film workflows. So in practice, that means a lot of virtual production. So virtual production as in this meeting of kind of classic live action techniques and continually evolving tech components like mocap, VR, you name it. So it's all in the we kind of look at it as all in the service of the creative to enable decisions made in real time with like the highest quality visuals. So virtual production is an exciting area for Epic. We've been really inspired by the work we see people doing. And this has led to a bunch of new stuff in UE4 that's really targeted for virtual production. And so let's take a tour of those features. So we'll kind of take a wide range of all the stuff that's in 420. We'll dive into some of the more specific parts just to go a little bit deeper, but also kind of like try to give you a range of all the stuff that's going on, because it is kind of a lot. And so when we think about development in this area, we kind of break it down into three different components. So first area is data, right? So this is all about pipeline. It's all about connecting like all of the upstream data that needs to come into UE4 so that you can actually use it in a virtual production environment. There's a media component, right? So we're all kind of working towards letting people achieve final pixel quality in UE4, or at least getting as close to there as you possibly can. So there's a whole bunch of different media components that converge in your Unreal project to make that happen. And then sort of last but not least is collaboration. So there's a whole bunch of people working together in the context of virtual production. We're looking for ways to improve that, make it easier, and just make it faster and better for people to work together. So first off, we'll dive into the data section. So the goal here, as I said, integrate with pipelines. So this has become a real focus for us at Epic. And the main thing that's come out in 420 is the Python API. So this has been a long requested, long desired, long argued internally feature, but 420 has a Python API. It's something that's like fully out there. It's like officially supported, documented. It's something that we're really excited for people to dive into. So to do that, first step is just enabling the plugin. So it is a plugin. You're going to need to enable both of these guys ideally, right? So there's the main Python editor script plugin that's got all the different calls. It's basically kind of trying to map the C++ API, but expose it in Python. The thing to note is that it is editor only right now. So we're kind of expecting it to be used in this editor context, really data focused to kind of prep your scenes. And then in addition, there's an editor scripting utilities plugin, and that's basically just a bunch of helper functions and a way to take commonly used things that may be a whole bunch of calls and kind of streamline them in. Just a bunch of convenience functions to make programmers' lives easier. And then kind of stemming from the availability of the Python API, we've also done a shotgun integration. So the shotgun integration was like kind of a twofold motivation there. The first was just that we had a bunch of clients asking for this integration. And then the second, as perhaps like sort of more selfishly, it was a way for us to like exercise the Python API, make sure that it was working for like a real world integration pipeline scenario before it was released. And so a couple of examples of that happening, right? So when you're using Shotgun, you can basically launch UE4 from their desktop app. And so this is basically finding the right version of UE4 to run. And then it's also like using a startup script. So this is really common in DCCs like Maya and Nuke, but just like with those applications, you can set up an init script here. So like in this case, our naming convention is init Unreal, init_Unreal, sorry. And if that's in your path, UE4 will pick it up when it starts up, and then you can do things like launch your pipeline, right? So really simple example of this is building a menu. So the Shotgun menu uses this feature to populate the tools that should appear in this menu. Seems kind of it may seem kind of basic, but it's like kind of a really critical part of like setting up a pipeline for artists to use. And then we'll show another quick example here of the loader app in Shotgun. So this is using the Shotgun app to load things in. We're going to browse the Shotgun database, find this table, and then load it. Right. So this is using the API to both import an FBX from a path on disk, and then it's also organizing it automatically in the content browser. Right, so it's sort of like analogous to the way people want to keep things organized on disk, like on their network disk, but it's kind of the same story. You don't really want a cluttered, messy content browser to find your stuff. So this is an example of where you can kind of pipeline it out, keep things organized, put them in the right place with the right name. And then in addition, we've also added an asset metadata feature. So here's another example just kind of stemming from the Shotgun integration where when we when we import the FBX, we're also inserting metadata. So in this case, it's metadata from Shotgun, right? So we're storing who created this asset in case you find it later, you want to ask them a question or get mad at them. Like, I mean, I would never get mad at Andy. This is just like a hypothetical, but you know what I mean. We're also storing the ID, so this might be if your pipeline wants to go look something up about that later or connect dependencies, know where things came from. Maybe this FBX came from a mile file, which came from you may want to traverse all those things up. We can store that stuff on the U asset so that it's there for you. And then in addition, we've kind of fixed an issue where FBX metadata was getting lost. So if you've already got if you've already got metadata in your FBX files, you don't want to lose that. And so now we make sure that you don't lose that. So that's in there now, so you can see it. Anytime you import an FBX with metadata, it comes in like this. You'll be able to right-click, as we just showed, view it. And then in addition, when you export it, that metadata will still be there. So in this case, if I exported this FBX, like it would have both the existing FBX metadata and then the additional Shotgun metadata that I added. And then sort of last but not least is an example where we're kind of calling UE4 from outside of UE4, right? So this is showing like a Maya publish where we're taking our Maya scene, we're generating an FBX, but then we're also going to generate a turntable. So what's happening here is not only is Maya exporting the FBX file, it's also like automatically importing it into like a templated turntable project that we've set up. And then it's also running that render, right? So this is a long way of saying you can run Python scripts from the command line. So if you pass the -execute Python script and then the path to your script, you can kind of run UE4 kind of in like a batch mode to do like different processing. So in this example, we automatically imported the FBX. That's something that you may want to do in your pipeline, right? So you may want to just push stuff in, right? So no one has to load it. You can do that automatically. We've started to see people pick that up, and it's kind of an interesting workflow. And then there's any number of things you can do. So anything you can do in Python, you can just run it like this. All right, so that's data. Now let's move into media. So as I mentioned before, media is like kind of all about how we get the final pixels to the screen. And goal here is just pro solutions for filmmakers. So there's a whole bunch of links in the chain there that make up like what gets the final pixel, and so we're trying to evolve UE4 to better support those things. So the first thing to bring up is timecode. So we've seen a lot of people using UE4 in production where like timecode is just an issue. Like there's all these different ways people are trying to store timecode. It really needed to be something we supported ourselves, and so as of 420, we have timecode in sequencer. So one of the view options now is you can view as timecode. You can also notice that in the timeline you can so when you scrub you can see what the timecode is. And like this seems like a really simple feature, but it was actually really complicated. So there's sort of two ways of thinking about it. This is like a super long explanation that I really struggled with how to explain. But really, if you boil it down, like what we're saying now is sequencer is frame accurate. So in order to implement timecode, we had to make sure that that the frames were rendering and displaying exactly when they're supposed to, right? So filmmakers are very acutely aware of these things. Like if there's any hitch or things aren't totally lining up, it's a real deal breaker. And so inherently with a game engine, it's we're to get the maximum performance, we're just trying to like render things as fast as we possibly can. So it's kind of like a little bit of a weird case where we actually just want it to be 24 frames per second. And so this motivated a change. So internally, time data is now stored as an integer, right? So this is allowing it to be kind of precisely locked in at 24 FPS, and so everything is locked in now. So it's really important actually to enable a whole bunch of other features that relate to synchronizing all the different stuff that's coming into UE4. And so once that was in there, it let us do some other cool stuff, like our integration with AJA, or is it Aja? I always say Aja. Is it Aja? I think that, yeah, they're both the same, right? Like, you guys know what I'm talking about. All right, so quick run through of the Aja stuff. So this is also a plugin. You're going to want to enable it, restart, etc. Next thing you want to do is jump into the Aja settings. So this is where you set up your defaults. So typically, like the Corvid cards have 4 ports. So you can basically define what the defaults are for each port. Like I've plugged it into port 1 for input. Maybe I'm using port 4 for output. And you can also set up the default FPS. So with that set up, let's quickly run through a couple of the main cases here. So the first one is basically media input from Aja, SDI input video into the engine. So let's see. Couple ways to do that. So the first kind of simplest way is to jump into this media tab. Once you've enabled the Aja plugin, you'll see each of the ports there. You can just drag it in. So if you've already got video streaming in, this is the fastest, easiest way to get it in. It's very straightforward. What's actually happening under the hood is that we're creating this thing called a media bundle. So this is a new asset type that's kind of trying to wrap things up and make it easier for you to manage these different video sources. So what's happening here when you just drag it in from the tab is it's using a built-in media bundle that's just stored in UE4. So this is basically always there as soon as you enable the plugin. But if you're really looking to configure this stuff up, you may want to just set this up yourself. It's also good to know what's happening under the hood. So let's jump into that. And now we're just going to create a media bundle by hand, right? So the way to do that is you right-click, go to Media and Media Bundle. You'll notice that there are a couple of other Aja settings, other Aja assets there that you can create. You can create them there, but I'm going to show you the way this kind of flow. This is kind of the recommended flow that I think is the most intuitive. And you'll see where we actually create these different, in this case, the Aja media source in the context of setting up the media bundle rather than creating it individually. So we'll create the media bundle and name it, and then we'll open it up here. And kind of as I said, this is where we're going to create the Aja media source, right? So we want the Aja media source asset to be connected to the media bundle. So I kind of recommend that you do it this way as opposed to doing it separately, right? So here we'll create it, and then this is where you can set up the port information. So here we'll grab port 1 because in our settings we had decided that was going to be the input. And then once you've set that up, you can click on media mode. So by default, it'll just give you whatever you've set up in your settings. And if you click on media mode here, this is how you would overwrite it for whatever reason. We're going to keep it at 24 and then save it. So now once you've set that up, you're basically in the same place that you were by dragging it in. But this is what the asset actually looks like. And then in addition, if you're interested, there's a whole bunch of stuff actually in the media bundle. And so this is a little bit of a microcosm of what it takes under the hood to actually set up a media player. So the first thing is the media player itself. So this is an asset that's in there now. If you've tried to load in files to just play back, you're probably familiar with the media player asset. And then in order to get that to work, you also need this video material here. So this is a material with the input from the video. The next thing is this render target guy here. This is for lens displacement. So if you're using if you have a lens distortion setup, you're going to be interested in diving into this part. It's not something that we offer ourselves yet, but it's another area that we're kind of working on. It's in the works to have a solution for helping people manage lens distortion. But just kind of looking ahead, this is the place where you would put it. And then last but not least is the actual video texture. So this is kind of this is kind of all the stuff that's actually needed to put a video on the screen. And so I personally find it really complicated. So usually I just I think of it as just the media bundle. And that was kind of the motivation behind adding the media bundle at all. There's a whole bunch of other settings in here, which we can go through. They're generally expert settings. A few to call out are just the timecode format. If you want to have input timecode, that's where you decide what type it is. We can capture audio. What else? Bunch of audio settings. I regret including this in the video now. But there's a whole bunch of there's a whole bunch listed here. You can really tune this. It basically matches all of the settings that the Aja cards offer. So that's input, and now let's jump into output. So similarly, you can take your render output from UE4 and output it through SDI. So this can go out to monitors, all that good stuff. Huh? Yes, spoiler alert. There's that. So in our example, we'll create a camera, call it Cam A, and then we'll create another camera, call it Cam B. Very exciting names. So now we're going to use this. This is a super simple example, but you can see like we've basically we've got a couple of things that ready to go, and we're going to show how to output both of these cameras to SDI. Similar story here, where you could create the Aja media output directly, but there's actually an easier way to do that I'm going to show the flow for now. So what I'd suggest is actually going to Window and Media Capture. So this is like a nice little tab that makes it more convenient to set up your SDI outs. Kind of just wraps all the stuff there, and it's going to guide you through making the asset. So here we have the render targets and the viewport capture. So the first thing you're going to do in this little tab is set up which camera actors you want to see. So in this case, we've created 2 cameras, so we'll add both of those guys in. Next up is the media output. So this is where we're going to create the actual media output asset. And then just like we did before, it kind of makes it easy to guide you through that. We'll create it here, save it somewhere, and name it. There we are. And then last but not least, we'll fill it in. So this was where the fill-in key is, right? So for output type, you get both those. So like it's fill-in key, but it's sort of, you can also think of it as RGB or RGBA. That's kind of how my brain works. But yeah, fill-in key, it's an option there. You can also choose the port. You always need to do this. Same story as with the input, where you get the default port from the settings, but you can overwrite it. And then there's a number of other settings that you can dial in, right? So output reference, the timecode format for sending timecode out, pixel format, and like a texel if you use texels. So now we're jumping back into the media capture tab. Once you hit capture, you're on air. So you get in the media capture tab, you get a little preview in the right. So no matter what you've got selected, you can always see what's there. You can pilot the camera. You'll notice that all of the game elements are automatically invisible, right? So even though we see the camera in the main viewport, it's not being broadcast out to SDI. And that's pretty much it. Like that's the SDI setup. Oh, sorry. One thing I did forget to mention is that because we've set up 2 cameras, we can toggle between them in the media capture panel. And so we only showed 2, but you may have more than 2, and there'll just be more buttons for you to switch through. So that's output. Last section on Aja has to do with timecode. So piggybacking off of the timecode improvements in Sequencer, we can also pull in timecode through the Aja card. And so to do that, the first thing you'll do is create a blueprint for a custom timestep. So you might be like saying, wait, what's a custom timestep? So a custom timestep is this new feature that we've added that allows users to control the timing of UE4, right? So all frames will be processed exactly when dictated by the custom timestep. It's kind of the underlying asset that dictates, like, yes, this is going at 24 FPS. If you think about it in rendering game engine terms, it controls when the engine ticks. So you might be saying that sounds a lot like Genlock. So the answer to that question is yes, it's Genlock. So we are going to change this. Like, the naming is confusing. It's kind of an interesting exercise in our development, just to give you a little picture into it. Like, where, UE4 is a game engine, so we work with a lot of game engineers, and like we were trying to figure out if this should be like a generic feature that other people would want. And then when we talk to people on the video side, they're like, "What is a custom timestep?" I said that myself. And so, anyways, we're probably going to be changing the labeling so that it's more obviously Genlock, and then it's probably easier to teach the game side what that means, because that is what the concept represents. So that is changing. Like, the feature itself is going to remain the same. We're going to start labeling it Genlock. All right, so let's jump back to actually showing how this works. So we've just created our custom timestep. And so this is another thing we've got to set up. you've got to tell it which port you want to, basically get the timecode from. And so in our case, we're getting it in along with the video, right? So it's coming in on port 1. Compile it and save it, close it. Now we're back, and we're going to create another blueprint, which is the timecode synchronizer. So this is the thing that's actually, the timecode provider. This is the thing that's going to actually help synchronize the timecode. So here's another one. We'll create it. We'll name it, and then pop it open. Same thing here, where we're telling it which port to use. So once we have these two assets, we can get things going in the settings. So there's a couple of places to set it up. Here's where you set the timecode provider. So this is saying this is telling you before, where do I get timecode from? And then you've got to set up your custom timestamp. Cracks me up every time still. And so this is where you tell it that yes, we're using this. We're using the Aja to time the engine tick, and it's going to be this 24 FPS thing that comes from the Aja card. Now you're set up. So to see it read out, there's a couple of console commands that you'll find useful, like stat FPS and stat timecode, and this will give you like a running clock that shows you what's happening. We don't have. I didn't include a video to show it, and I don't know if it goes without saying, but if you use sequence recorder and you've got you've set up all this Genlock stuff, like your recordings will have timecode when they go into sequencer that obviously like sort of reflects the timecode that was recorded. So all the timecode you get when you're Genlocked will be the timecode that you record with. And then if you're not using Genlock, it'll just get the timecode from like the machine clock. One more thing on timecode is that we also have an option to use to get the timecode Genlock from an audio port. And so to do that, it's the same steps, but instead just have to also enable the audio capture timecode provider. And then instead of choosing the Aja timecode provider, you would choose an audio capture one. So that's something to be aware of as well if that's part of your workflow. One thing to keep in mind is that we have found in our testing that it's very dependent on your actual audio card. And so sometimes we've noticed that depending on the audio card that you have in the machine, there could be a little bit of lag. So if you're interested in this area or that you're really looking at that hard, like that's something that our engineers would be interested to talk to you about, just like which cards, like what's the right way to test it. On our end, like we support it, but there's it's an area that we could use some more production examples on. All right. What's next? Editorial, right? So when using sequencer, like you're oftentimes interfacing with an editorial team, right? Virtual production context, you're shooting a whole bunch of stuff. It's going to editorial. Interop with there is really critical. And so it's something we get asked about a lot. We did offer like some lightweight tools, like an old school CMX CDL, but we're really looking at ways to improve our interop with things like Avid, Premiere, and Final Cut. And so that's led us in 420 to introduce Final Cut XML feature. So we now support sequencer export and import to and from Final Cut XML. So a quick demo to show here. Right, so when you're in sequencer, as long as you've got like a shots track, you can export a Final Cut XML. And so we'll go ahead and do that. We've already rendered out all of our media, and then we'll import the XML into Premiere. So you can see all of the stuff come in, right? So we've built a sequence in Premiere, and then we've also pulled in all the media automatically as well. So we'll jump in the sequence, and you can see this matches up with what we just saw in sequencer. So now we'll make some changes just to exercise it and show how these changes are going to go back into sequencer. So here we go. We're round tripping, right? So this is a new XML that incorporates all of the changes we just made in Premiere. And now we'll jump back into sequencer and re-import it. So I'm importing this, finding our new XML. You can see it now matches up with what we had in Premiere. So this is in 420, something to check out if you're interested. So it's kind of a really basic in and out. I think that we're in general really interested in how people expect to use it. Like, is this the right way to send stuff out to editorial? Like, what's editorial going to provide back? Is it going to line up? There's a whole bunch of stuff that goes into like naming conventions and just ways teams work with editorial that we're interested in diving into. So this Final Cut XML feature is like a nice like tech building block for us to do more work on. And so we're excited to see where this leads. That's media in 420. So let's go to the last section, collaboration. So as I mentioned, we see like teams working together. Like there's lots of people. Like if you saw Real Time Live, there were a whole bunch of different virtual production scenarios where multiple people were working together. This is a good way of just eliminating bottlenecks, right? So lots of people working together, multitasking, everybody coming together. Everybody's changes affecting each other's. There's a lot of stuff happening in a shoot, and it's more than one person can do. So the first big area to show here is this is connecting with LiveLink, right? So this is LiveLink is a relatively new feature that I think a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards. Like Dave Hibbets did a whole talk on it. But just to run through this stuff, there's kind of three main areas of LiveLink. So the first thing are like pushing from GCCs into UE4. So there's a Maya LiveLink, there's a Mobu LiveLink, and then there's also a Blender LiveLink that's in the works. So this can be really helpful for bringing things in like animation, cameras, lights, properties, basically stuff from the upstream kind of traditional content pipeline. So bringing all that stuff into UE4 through the LiveLink plugin. Second area is streaming mocap, right? So we're working with a ton of mocap providers. This is, I think, all of them: Vicon, iKinema, Dynamics, Noitom, 3Lateral, and Profile. If I left anybody out, I apologize. Did my best to figure out what was going on, like in terms of what's in the works. So some of these are released, and all of them are at the very least in progress. Our approach here is that we really want to move all of these companies over to LiveLink. We feel like it's going to be more robust. We are really invested in the idea of LiveLink because we feel like it's going to make it easier for these folks to integrate with UE4. It's also going to be just a better platform for us to make sure that everything is coming in properly and that we have consistency no matter which mocap provider you're using. It's a similar story there for the real-time camera tracking guys. So NCAM, Moses, Halide. These are all things that are, I believe these are all in progress. None of them are fully released yet. It'd be something to follow up with those folks, but we're all trying to move them over to LiveLink as well. Next slide. So this, if you were at GDC, you might have seen this. It's a iPad virtual camera plugin that we've developed. So we've seen a lot of these. Like a lot of people have made their own, but it's also something that we felt we needed, and it's something we wanted to include in the product, right? So this is an iPad app that you can download. You can connect it up to your UE project, and it's a pretty fully featured virtual camera plugin. You can change lens. You can use it in these wherever you are. So there's a whole bunch of people doing things like this in VR, which is also great. But the iPad's just kind of nice because it's easy, it's cheap, relatively. And it's just always available. You don't have to set up a volume or anything like that. So something that we use internally a lot for our own kind of like early previs. And I guess in this case, we even used it for the final result. Check it out. It's available now on the App Store. So I'm pointing this out because it might be a little bit misleading. So the app is called Unreal Remote 2. It's actually just like a general Unreal controller app, but kind of buried in here is the fact that it can be used with the virtual camera plugin. So that's the app to get. You should download it. I lost my train of thought. I didn't know what to say there. All right, so that's collaboration in 420. Kind of bringing it all back together. Virtual production is an epic priority. Like it's something that that's I don't know how else to say it. It's something that we care deeply about, and it's something that's going to remain a priority going forward. Like almost as much as Fortnite. Um, some people say internally they'll be like, the priorities are Fortnite and virtual production. It's like, okay, that's cool. So with that in mind, I just wanted to give you some preview of what's coming in 421. Like, so 421 is coming out towards the end of the year. I think November. And so we are able to preview some of the stuff that we know is going to be in there. So let's do this. First off is like on the data side, it's just going to be more pipeline, more Python stuff. Right, so there was a little bit of, there are a few components that didn't quite make it Python-wise into 420, and we're going to follow up and finish those. And then in addition, we're going to be looking at some other major pipeline areas like USD. So USD, I feel like, has been like the hot topic of the SIGGRAPH. Like there's USD everywhere. Like there was this awesome birds of a feather. Everybody's talking about it, and we're really excited about that because it's been a long time coming. Like we've always been really optimistic about the possibilities of USD. It's really exciting to see like people actually adopting it and figuring out how to use it practically, and that's something that we want to be a part of. So we have Datasmith for some of the other DCCs, but like we weren't really sure what to do with Maya, and it's possible that USD maybe just is that solution. And so with that in mind, we've been working on basically making a real USD plugin that we can start giving out to people. So here is it in action. So this is our developer Rex made this for us, and he's just going to show a really basic round trip. So initially we're looking at like kind of a scene layout, just kind of getting the pieces working. So he's exporting a USD from Maya and then bringing it back, pulling it in to UE4, and you can see how all the pieces are in the same place. It's kind of a mundane example, but it's cool to see this stuff like going from one to the other, just like that. Next in our example, we're going to move something. So we're going to take this guy and we're going to move it up. And then we're going to save out a USD just to show it being saved out. All of this transform information is being recorded in the USD. Scroll down to show this particular shape being stored. So you can see numbers are in there. And then we'll do it again, right? So we'll just show the piece moving again and the numbers changing. So we only moved it in Z. You can see that the Z number is different there. Last but not least, we'll bring it back into Maya. So now he's going to close this up, get ready to bring in his the USD he just exported. And now when we open it up, we can see the one piece we moved is moved to the same place. So that I don't know how to talk about this super well, but because it's just like for me, it's amazing to see something like this, even though it's just like little pieces like moving and into the right place. It's just I don't know, like the first time I saw it, I was just like, this is amazing. And Rex was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, no, dude, you don't understand. This is amazing. So we're pretty excited. One thing to note is that it's going to be a Python-based implementation. This is something that we're really happy about, and it actually kind of only came about because we were just really struggling with how we should do this. You know, USD is supposed to be a standard, but it's still evolving, and so we weren't really sure what the best way to set this up would be to like account for that evolution. So the Python thing has been like a nice balance for. So the idea here is that it's a Python-based implementation. It makes it easier for pipeline TDs to modify it and overwrite it, or tailor it to how they're actually going to use USD, and then hopefully we can kind of follow along and learn these production patterns so that like our like kind of out of the box USD implementation keeps evolving and improving along with the trends that we see. And then with that in mind, we're definitely interested in talking to anybody who's already using USD or has some ideas about how they want to use USD. We're really at a point where we have the capabilities to do more, but we're really kind of looking for real world production guidance. Also on the Python front is Sequencer. So if you've dove into the 420 Python API, you'll notice there is a little bit of missing functionality, and that's mainly in Sequencer. So we weren't able to get all of the Sequencer features into the Python API. We were able to get, you can like sort of build up a level sequence and set it up initially, but once you've built it, there's not that much more you can do there. So for Sequencer, we're going to be supporting things like animation import, all of the capture movie and rendering capabilities, and then a bunch of kind of editor-only operations like moving, setting the selection range, like a bunch of stuff that you can do in the UI. It's not exposed to Python yet, but it will be for 421. And then in addition, like a lot of our initial USD use cases that we're testing out are related to sequencer, like sort of having a USD for Maya that sets up what the level starts out at, and then you make changes on a per take basis, and then those things will be also exported to USD potentially. So that's going to be coming, and then kind of last but not least here is timecode related things for editorial. So kind of helping to build out the editorial pipeline. We're going to try to make it easier to get the timecode out that is recorded so that you can do interesting things with it. Also on the sequencer front, there's a whole bunch of improvements coming to sequence recorder. Some of that stuff made it into 420, but it's continuing on. So like a good example of that is like there's a take system now, so you can easily record takes of the same thing and like kind of name them easier and organize it a little bit better in your project. We're also looking at things like a re-record workflow where you kind of maybe you do a big mocap pass over something, and then you do virtual camera on top of it, or you want to sort of you liked everything about the take, but except for one thing, and you want to redo it. We're trying to make that use case a lot easier because we see it happen a lot. And then in addition, there's timecode usability. Like timecode's a new feature, as I mentioned before. There was a whole bunch of under the hood things that we had to do to make it work, and there's more to do now on usability, just to make it easier to know what's going on. Because that timecode component is so critical to lining everything up after you've shot it. On the video side, there's also we're also working with Blackmagic. So in addition to Aja, you'll see all the same features, but if you're using Blackmagic cards, that's going to work. And then beyond 421, we're looking into multi-user collaboration. So this is another kind of hot topic lately. If you saw our real-time live presentation, you saw kind of some of the a super early version of that they used, right? So this was we called it out as collaborative virtual production. You could see that in the presence that was shown when Gavin and Moen and Grayson were all working together. But similar to the ray tracing, it's like a big feature that we're still figuring out when it's going to get released. So I just wanted to call it out because it's super relevant to virtual production. As something that we're working on, and it's going to be coming out soon. It's not going to be in 421, but it is coming. So that's all I got. Thank you. That's all I can think to say. And I'm Ryan. I think we have time for questions. Yeah.
So we have the infamous microphone, which I will throw at you in order for you to ask questions. Just speak into the mic. So who's got some questions?
Easy throw.
Easy throw.
With the virtual camera with the iPad, we've been using it straight away after release.
Cool.
Blueprint support, because it was quite difficult to kind of access the blueprint and get into the kind of nuts and bolts of setting it up and customizing it.
Yeah, let me check on that. It should be something that we share if you're interested. So I don't know what the state of. I should have known that, but
Okay.
Just like anything, we would expect to offer it.
Okay.
So I think that we can just follow up. Maybe it just hasn't.
You just can't get back to the initial class to kind of access the sort of setup and customize. And I wonder what the blueprint plans were for the virtual camera customization. That's all.
Yeah. Okay. I will follow up. I'll get your info after, and then make sure that.
Thank you.
We can give that to you.
Who else has a question?
Cool. Video input on the Aja cards. Fill and key video in?
Yes.
Cool.
So that's one of the settings. I think I glossed over it. But
And on the Genlock, are you handling all the keys exported by Aja? So you've got tri-level, black burst, and PTP?
yes.
Are you going to integrate in PTP? Because that's not on Aja.
Say that again?
The new timecode, the new SMPTE timecode standard.
No, we don't have that yet.
Okay.
That might be that's something to follow up on, because there's another guy, Andy, who works directly on that part, who's not at SIGGRAPH, and so I'll maybe want to connect with you on which one you use and what the priority is, because he's the one that's kind of deciding those things.
Cool. Thanks.
called on me. Who else has a question? In the back. Can you catch?
Yeah, I tried that the ARKit camera controller thing,
Yeah.
but it just like at first it was running with just rotation, and then once I clicked on like the plugin, it just immediately stopped reading from the iPad.
Okay.
Is that like a common issue, or does it just?
I'm
normally
gonna
just
go ahead
work?
and say that's not intentional. No, yeah, like we should figure that out. It's brand new, and so like
It
first
should,
time it's being used outside.
it should
Epic.
work with the iPad 12 9-inch, right?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
so. It works with all of them, right? You don't need an iPad Pro. Does it? Do we need an iPad Pro? Pro only? Okay.
Because I tried a different AR app and it seemed to work fine on that iPad, and then I tried the plugin and it didn't.
Yeah, we'll
read.
have to double check on that. I was under the impression that it worked on any, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
What about 360 equirectangular capture in sequencer?
360, like from a video source?
No. So basically, in sequencer right now, you basically have to fire up NVIDIA Ansel, do a capture, script this, and basically step a frame,
Yeah.
capture again. Works. It takes forever. It seems like there's no way to get a 360 rectangular out
there's
of
no
anything.
feature that I know of that makes that easy. So that'd be a feature request that we can follow up on.
Other questions?
Huh? We don't. Yeah. So text is like it's a project that we're trying to line up in the roadmap. Well, yeah. I don't want to like defer everything to Andy, but it's like it's been a hot topic internally on it. So we know we need to do it.
I guess two quick questions. First one is, how many virtual cameras, like virtual AR iPad cameras, can you support at once? Is it only one, or could we do multiple if you had a virtual set sort of deal?
I think you can only do one until we have multi-user.
Okay, and so that was actually into the second thing. Will there be any multi-user controls coming to iPad? So you're not necessarily stuck using a desktop PC, but you can still kind of access some of the cool stuff on an iPad?
You mean like have like an iPad control app that does
Exactly,
stuff?
yeah.
So we do that with OSC on some of our projects. So like there are, I believe, so we had to make some, there was like a Touch OSC plugin, I think in the marketplace that we've improved.
Yeah, okay.
And so I think they pushed those changes back. I can follow up on that.
Okay.
And so we've used those on our shoots. Like on our own shoots that we do internally, like we'll have an iPad set up with a bunch of OSC controls so that they can make it, so like the DP and stuff can change stuff, like change exposure or like, move stuff around.
Right.
It's actually, we ended up like during the course of the shoot, we just kept adding more and more stuff to it. So OSC is what we use internally for that.
Cool.
I don't know if that's always going to be the case, but that's what I would look at right now if I were you.
Sounds good.
Anybody else?
Hi, I'm actually just going to piggyback off of his question. So with the iPad remote control, what would be the range of that? Say like if I was able to have my desktop and then at home be able to view it through my iPad? Because I think I saw it was connecting through Wi-Fi.
So you're saying you want to have a computer not at home, but be at home?
It would be
and
like
use it?
like a remote control.
Yeah, I believe you can do that. They've tried that. They've tried that across offices, like from one of our offices to another.
All right, awesome.
More questions.
I feel bad about that text answer. Like I'm gonna remember his face. Like when this topic comes up again, like on our roadmap, I'm gonna remember his face. Like,
Will you have several?
it's good though. It's good though. I'm gonna remember that if we decide if for some reason it's not in there. I'm gonna have this image now.
Is it possible? Sorry.
Next question over here.
Is it possible to have several video outputs?
Well, yeah, as many as the card supports, I guess. Like so,
So this will be two different views of the same scene at the same time?
Yeah, you should be able to do that. So I guess you could have up to 4 outputs. It would depend on your scene and if it can hit the performance. But yeah, you can just set it up to be all 4 outputs.
Okay.
You'll be next.
When you were talking about the 4 outputs, would that be supported on the Blackmagic cards as well? There are the ones that have 4 video outs.
I would assume
Serial
so.
digital. Ah, excellent.
Yeah, I mean, like I don't like it's still being worked on, so like we're just starting to get it into testing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's what the card offers. So we would have to. So it would be. I don't know. It feels wrong to me that we wouldn't support it.
Okay. I like that.
We'll get you next.
I've caught that. So when you were talking about sort of not hitting the frame rate when you've got multiple outputs, for example, how do you actually guarantee that you've got frame sync, even if you do have enough performance headroom?
How do we ensure that we? So this is for the case where you have not enough performance and it's lagging?
No, so when you've got enough time, how do you, are you ensuring you've got frame sync? So you've got Genlock coming out.
Yeah, so that's the custom.
Right?
That's the kind of the custom Timestep part I was talking about, where that's how we make sure that the engine tick is synchronized to like the frame rate.
Right. So it's completely integer based. There's no way that you can sort of go through and say, okay, so I'm thinking about multiple machines here, really.
Okay.
So are you able to sort of like complete frame lock between 2 machines, or are you only capable of doing that within one?
You can frame lock between multiple machines with the Genlock.
Okay. Okay.
Does that make sense? Like, right? Like, so, like if they're all Genlock together, then they're all ticking at that.
Genlock is 1 frame, right? It just tells you the VSync is happening now.
Okay.
So.
To his question, I'll add the second half. If you saturate performance,
yeah,
and you're going to drop a frame,
yeah,
and let's say you have 5 machines going in sync,
yeah,
do all 5 machines drop that frame? Is what his summon asking.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, they should. I believe that they all stay the same. I don't know. We should test it. I'm gonna follow. I don't know the answer to this. I was just, this is where I wish Andy was here. Full disclosure, I work on the pipeline part mostly. So yeah, like I remember us discussing this, and I'm really sorry. I'm just gonna get your info and connect you to Andy.
This is a quick question. I don't know, maybe other people with who've had experience with the iPad virtual cam would know. But so I shoot a lot of action and thinking, well, I do a lot of whip pans and stuff like that. Is the virtual camera able to keep up with stuff like that, like fast camera movements?
I mean, that's a good question. I think you should.
I've never, I don't know if anyone's had experience with that or knows. Not really whip pans, or like how about like really fast counters and stuff like that? Really? Okay. And then how do you think we can like get that to that point? What? Okay. So okay, there are. Got it. Cool. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I like the part going to to the avids and all that stuff. Are we gonna be able to render more AOVs than what's in the buffers right now?
It is possible to do it if you really dive into composure.
Yeah, that's what we've been using, but like we want to get more information than what we're getting from the current buffers, right? Like not just the depth scene and the stencils, but really say like I only want what this slide is hitting, for example.
Yeah, it's tough right now. There are a bunch of improvements to composure that are in the works. I don't know, like it's kind of a lot of stuff, but it's focused on a lot of these use cases that are relevant to film workflows, right? So passes, like making it so that it's easier, prepping for comp.
Right.
So we're not really ready to talk about the details of those things yet, but it is being worked on, and so might be good to let's just follow up afterwards, just so we can get back in touch when it's closer to when we have something to show.
Cool.
All right.
So, any intention to integrate in with Vantage?
We don't have anything for Vantage on the roadmap right now. We could talk more offline about the use cases and the needs, just so we can fold that in. That's probably the first time anybody's asked me about Vantage, so like just be another thing to follow up on.
Getting away from that a little bit, are you guys planning on adding more codecs in terms of input?
Yeah.
Particularly red.
Oh, for input.
Yeah, for bringing other video files and things like that into Unreal.
Yeah, so we're definitely talking about video files out, like codecs for output, right? So we don't like, you can only do frames and AVIs right now.
Yeah.
So we're working on licensing deals to be able to support the actual codecs that people use.
Ingesting as well?
Yeah, so you would be able to read them potentially, and then I don't know, like the red files. That hasn't really been discussed on our side yet, but it would be possible for sure.
Okay.
Anyone else? I think that's it.
Thanks, guys.